I actually, to let you know, I just got it recording right now, so I'm just gonna jump
Sweet.
right into it.
Sounds
But
great.
yeah, like I got your new single into my email the other week, and a little message saying, "Hey, would you like to interview her?" I pressed play on that, and I was just like, "Fuck yeah, this is sick!" Really,
Thank
really
you.
love the vibe of it. It's kind of got like that darker, like 90s sound, and I don't know, it just hits close to home of like the music that I grew up listening to, stuff like
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I grew up listening to a lot of Weezer and Ben Folds 5 and that kind of stuff, along with like a lot of like pop that was happening at the same time. So like I I've like the people that have said similar things like that to me, like people that are around. I'm assuming you're close to my age. I'm 33, so I
Yeah, I'm
guess like people in their
35 too,
30s.
so like
Yeah,
same era.
yeah, exactly. And when people around our age say that kind of thing to me, I'm like, fuck yeah, that's exactly what I was kind of going for, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's so like true to, I don't know, just it's almost like I can't put a word to it. It's like a feeling you get when you listen to like those songs from the past and your new single right now too. So it's just cool. Well done. And
Thank you.
yeah, thanks for like bringing that vibe back. It's really
Thanks.
awesome.
I
Yeah, and
appreciate that.
yeah, I want to get more in detail of like the new single and the EP, but before that, I feel like we should get to know you a bit too. I'm new to Meg and everything, and yeah, like so apparently you're originally from Newfoundland, is that true?
Yes. Yep. Yep. So I was born and raised in a town called Grand Falls, Windsor, which to I think most people outside of Newfoundland would consider it a pretty small town. I think there's about 13,000 people in it now. But in Newfoundland standards, it's like the fourth or fifth biggest community there. So it's kind of this weird mix of like uh, being rural, but also when I was growing up, I guess I didn't realize that it was rural. And then I moved to St. John's to go to university when I was just about 18. And then I lived there for 9 years and then moved to Toronto in 2015.
Oh, so that's very recent how you came up.
Yeah. Yeah.
What brought you out this way?
Well, I fronted a band for 8 years called Repartee, and we were based out of Newfoundland for a chunk of that time. And it's just very, very expensive and difficult to tour from Newfoundland. Um, and so it was kind of this thing where, I mean, like I had always, not always, but like I had been wanting to move to Toronto for a couple years. My partner had moved up in 2012, and I was like, it was kind of, it felt to me like it was time to go. And then 2 months, like I had planned to move up in January of 2015, and then 2 months before I was moving, I actually met our management team and record label at the time, and they were also based in Toronto. So everything just kind of made a lot of sense to come here.
Mhm.
I definitely miss a lot about home, and especially right now with everything with COVID, like Newfoundland has this policy now where you can't actually visit there. You have to own property in order to even get to the island, or you have to like request an exemption. So it's kind of a bizarre time to be living in Toronto and being from there right now.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know that about Newfoundland, how like locked down they are right now. And actually, like a friend of mine just this week, I gotta let him know this information because he kind of quit his job and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna travel out east, and I guess he'll get to Newfoundland and there's just like a wall up. Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
maybe.
yeah, and yeah, I'm sorry, like you can't go like see your friends and family right now from
Yeah.
back home. It's I don't know, it's such weird times, and even I don't know. I guess like moving to Toronto makes sense as a musician, like pro, like or like before like this whole COVID shit happened. I knew like a lot of people who weren't even signed on labels, but they could get on shows every night, and just
Yes,
there was like a thriving thing, right? But just kind of
totally.
came to like a halt right now. So
Yeah, I know it, like it really made a lot of sense to me at the time. And I mean it's so hard to like envision a normal functioning music industry right now, but it does make a lot of sense to be somewhere like, we had to apply for funding every time we left the island. And it was literally like, being in Newfoundland is one thing, but being based in St. John's, it's a 9-hour drive just to get to the ferry to get off the island, right? So it would take 2 days of travel to get from St. John's to Halifax, which was the next nearest, metropolis. So it makes a lot of sense to live in a major center, and at least to live on the mainland, because it, in terms of touring especially, it is so much easier. Things are so much more accessible up here.
Yeah, I didn't know like how much of a chore it was to get to the mainland. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like there are some pros to living in Newfoundland and being a musician as well. Like the music scene there is unlike anything that I've seen anywhere else. Like it's, everybody is incredibly supportive, and it's really small and tight knit. So you kind of have the only other comparison that I've heard people mention is Quebec, where you have people that are like, can have functional, sustainable careers kind of contained within Quebec. And in Newfoundland, it's kind of the same way. I know obviously Newfoundland is much smaller, but like, there are musicians that are not known outside of Newfoundland, but do very well within the province. And like, one of the plus sides to the challenges that came with touring is that like when we hit the road, we were dedicated to being gone for a couple weeks at a time, because it didn't make sense to go out for any less than like 2 weeks, right? Because it takes 2 full days to get off the island. So, it's I guess it depends on how you look at it, but there's definitely some interesting upsides to being there as well.
Yeah, I guess there's two sides of the coin, the situation and everything. But yeah, I also want to know, like, even go back further in time. What kind of gravitated you to become a musician yourself? I also know like you produce music as well, and like, what kind of I don't know, is there any like early memories that gave you the spark of like, or what kind of morphed it into like such like a big part of your own identity?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess music has always been something that has been a huge chunk of my identity, like for as far back as I can remember. And what that looked like when I was a kid was, do you know what the Kiwanis Music Festival is? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with it, but
right.
Let me know.
Yeah, so it's like a classical music festival. I think it's like a national thing, but I really only know it in the context of growing up in Newfoundland. And basically it's like, you do like the certain number of classes, and then like you do these like master classes with your teachers leading up to it, and then it's like you do this performance and you get graded on it, and it's like a classical competition festival kind of.
Cool.
Yeah, and so that was like my whole musical experience, really. Like I kind of wanted to do the Battle of the Bands thing, but I was really timid and really intimidated by everybody around me, and I felt like it was like kind of a thing that only the boys did and all that stuff. So my musical outlet was mostly classical. And then when I went to university, I studied classical music at Memorial in St. John's as well. And then I started my last band, Repartee, in my final year there, kind of out of a little bit of frustration, because I had this plan to like be an opera performer and do that whole thing for a while. Like performing was always what has drawn me to music. Like even when I was a kid, like that was what I always loved to do. And then it just kind of wasn't really in the cards for me classically. So I started the band, and then kind of just dove right into it from there.
Yeah, that's really cool. And even like this recently I've been hearing about like there's quite an opera scene in the East Coast as well. I had a guest on the show, Tanya Chinchuli, and she's wrote a book about like a Newfoundland like classic opera like legend. I'm blanking on the name right
Yeah.
now. It's bugging me, but yeah, and she like that's something that's kind of like brand new, like or like it's rarely kind of like talked about here how big like classical music is on the East Coast, because a lot of people just kind of relate the East Coast to kind of like, I guess, folk
Like
style,
folk, yeah, yeah.
like kind of Irishy type deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a pretty like eclectic stuff going on in little niche scenes, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, there totally is. I think that a lot of that kind of speaks to like I don't know about the entirety of the East Coast, but like with Newfoundland specifically, because it is geographically isolated, you know, it's hard to get to, it's hard to leave. So you get these kind of like weird and interesting clusters of like um I don't know, music popping up and art and culture and that kind of thing. So it's neat.
Yeah, that's dope. And
Mm.
you mentioned you were in a band for like quite a number of years. What kind of caused you to take your own solo route and everything?
Well, a lot of it came down to the fact that I was really mentally ill for a couple of years. And, you know, I was like, we were working really, really hard and we had all moved up to Toronto. And the band kind of became my life in this kind of unhealthy way. And I just reached a point where I was like not functioning. Like I couldn't work, I couldn't really do much. I mean, I was working at a call center at the time, and I picked up this like kind of counter serving job at this like vegan place that just like shut down like 2 months after I started working there.
Oh shit.
But yeah, but basically that's kind of what it boiled down to. Like it was just I had reached a point where I wasn't functioning and it wasn't a healthy situation, and so I um just did what I could to kind of push pause on everything. And then um, I just kind of came out like it's kind of interesting because it's hard for me to like, there was not really like a definitive um, point where we all decided to move on or whatever. It was kind of a blurry mess of you know, some dark time. So yeah, I was writing throughout all of it, and then you know, I wanted to go back to the industry. I had a lot of negative experiences in it, but I also felt kind of compelled to come back to it in some way, and keep writing. Like when I left the band, I was kind of like, okay, Meg, this is your time now to try and figure out if there's some other direction you want to go in, go back to school. Like, you know, for 8 years, the band was my life. So now it was like this kind of wide open space of like, what are you going to do? And um, in some ways, it felt pretty organic that I kind of just came back to music and came back to writing and started producing my own stuff, and then got introduced to this world in Toronto here of women and non-binary people in production, which was something that I honestly had never seen before. So I was like, wow, this is really neat. And then, yeah, I guess that's kind of the long version of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's cool to know. And even like I find like not even like in band situations, like beyond that, people could get kind of trapped in a rut of
Mm-hmm.
just the routine and like of something that almost like identifies himself with, whether it's like a
Yes.
job or just like being with like some toxic people in your life too. And like it takes like a lot of strength to even break away with that sometimes, because it becomes like so routine. And you feel like that was like kind of like the situation with your band, like it becoming like your world. And like, and also
Yeah.
how did it initially feel to step away? Was it like, oh, like a weight off my shoulder, like you didn't know you had was there, or like?
Well, not really, honestly. Like it was such a it's very complicated. And even now looking back on it, I have a hard time kind of unraveling and really like teasing out what was happening, or you know, what I don't know what the situation actually was. Like it felt a little bit like a boiling frog situation where I had started this band with these certain intentions, and then, years later, it was like, I mean, I felt like I was kind of out of control of what was happening in my life in general. Like it was like I was doing all of these things, and some of it I really loved. Like that's kind of the tricky juxtaposition. I think what you were talking about there is when we find ourselves in ruts or in difficult situations. Like I think the thing that makes it so complicated, and the thing that um, gets us in those positions in the first place, is that it's not all bad.
Mm.
And my time in repartee honestly had some of the best memories of my life. So it was like this very complicated situation of like, okay, I know that there are elements of this career, of this work, of this art that serve me very well, and I really love, and I feel very purposeful when I do it. But there's also this like very scary, I guess, side of things where I just felt like I just didn't have any control. Like if I wanted to leave, or to, like it was we like at the time that I left, there were so many people wrapped up into it. It wasn't just my bandmates, but it was like also our team and management, and like I just had this impending sense that like if I couldn't continue, I was going to let all of these people down. So,
Yeah.
it was kind of this crushing weight of like, well, I can't keep doing this, but if I leave, then, all of these people's lives are affected. So it wasn't a relief. It was actually really painful to leave. And, you know, it's been over 3 years now, and there's still some after effects of it. And like, as I'm kind of taking these steps and entering back into the music industry, I'm, reminded of a lot of the painful stuff and the difficult stuff. So, I definitely am in a much better place, and, I'm incredibly privileged to have access to therapy and all that stuff. And, I don't know where I'd be without that. So I am definitely doing much better. But it wasn't this like, shedding all this weight and this relief kind of thing. It was definitely quite complicated.
Yeah. Like sometimes, like, yeah, with a complicated situation like that too, it just takes time, and like things creep up in ways you don't even know. It's like,
Yeah.
actually, not to get into this, but yeah, I related to like a lot of stuff you said with like different situations as well too. So
Mm.
yeah, I totally understand, especially the feeling of like just kind of stepping away from something because, and like knowing that other people are relying on you,
Yes.
but almost like you have to do that to like take care of yourself. Like for the
Exactly.
longest time, I was always like a person who would put my own self aside for other people, and just recently, as like the past couple of years, it's been like kind of very meditative, and even as terrible as this whole COVID shit is, just like having time to just stop a bit and like think
Yes.
too was
Yeah.
very healing for me as well.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. It's hard to do. I mean, especially if you are entangled with other people, and I don't know if you're, I literally don't know you, but
Yeah.
if you are like a people pleasing kind of person, then the idea of like disappointing other people or letting other people down, or knowing that, this, again, this like very painful, awful juxtaposition of like, I have to do this to take care of myself, knowing that that's going to cause pain for other people. It can be really, really hard, like a really difficult thing to navigate. So
Yeah.
good for you for reflecting on that.
Yeah, cheers. And good for you too for like acknowledging that and doing your thing. Being a human's tricky sometimes, you
It's
know?
so fucking hard.
Where's the manual?
I don't know.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, one thing I'm gonna mention, one thing that kind of like helped me relieve like a lot of stress was video games, and I was looking in your press release, and it said you're a big fan of The Legend of Zelda, which
Yes.
takes me close to home as well. And I just want to know, like, do you have a favorite one in that series?
It's really hard to pick because it is such a like nostalgic thing for me. Like I'm assuming you're also a fan of the series.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, I know, like, to me, the feeling that I get when I play Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time is like unparalleled, but I'm like, I don't know if these games are actually that amazing or just if they
Facts.
like mean something to me. But when I started playing Breath of the Wild, it was like, I don't know. I mean, it's just like, I feel like that game is kind of well known as one of the greatest, most expansive video games in the last, decade or so. So
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
They're
amazing.
all awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that's facts as well too. But yeah,
Yeah.
usually my go-to is somebody asks me my favorite. I'll say Link to the Past because exactly nostalgia, just the feeling I had when I was a child. But
Yeah.
actually, like, yeah, speaking of like just taking time for yourself for like COVID or whatever, I finally finished Breath of the Wild, and I started it like when it was new,
Yeah.
and I had like the weirdest experience that like pushed me away from it. Like, I was with my past girlfriend for like almost 7 years, and we were playing it together, and we didn't finish it, but like in the middle she broke up with me, so it
Oh
turned into like
no.
I tried to play it like afterwards, and it turned into like PTSD.
Oh
but,
yeah.
but like, so like 2 years later, it's like COVID. I'm just like, oh, I gotta play this. I hear this is the best game ever. And yeah, just randomly, an Instagram account hit me up like the week I was about to put it in, and it was, I don't even know if this is even legal, but it was like for a company that delivers shrooms. So I ordered like these mushrooms, and I had like this meditative weekend where I turned off my phone, and like I just kind of tripped a little bit, and I played Breath of the Wild like front to back, and it was just like this beautiful experience.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So
That's
and
amazing.
yeah, even like to go like full circle back into your music too. Your latest single, Bomb, it says like in your press release, it's about navigating memories. So that's something I did in like the weirdest way with the Breath of the Wild, and I want to know a little bit further of the meaning behind Bomb and everything.
Right. Well, I mean, it is like, how do I explain this? Like, I know obviously bomb is a metaphor. It's not a literal bomb, but I literally got this was like in 2017 or 2018, maybe 2017. And I got this like notification on my phone, and I noticed that like, this was kind of when I was in the thick of my mental illness and leaving the band, and everything was all like, my life was just a dumpster fire. And so I like was sitting down at the keyboard, and I looked at my phone, and this response, like this like physiological response started happening, and I was like, well, that's it now, my whole day is written off. I'm just going to be ruminating on this thing all day, and like I feel I feel like I guess like proud is kind of the word. I don't know, but like I like the fact that I had this like stimulus response looking at my phone, and then I sat there and kind of wrote the song pretty well all in one go. I think I probably went back and revisited and reworked some things, but to me it was kind of like this like snapshot of like, that's what was happening at that time in my life. Like I would I was trying to get better and start over, I guess, in a way, and try to figure out who I was, because like I said, like my whole identity in a very intense and unhealthy way was that band. And so trying to like untangle myself from that and what that meant for me in my life. And I mean, it was painful in a lot of ways, not to mention the fact that I had like, lost my job. Like that was also a huge source of my income, right? So like,
Lots of layers of shit going on.
yeah, exactly. And like, it was just a very, very difficult time. So it I feel like it is kind of a bit of a snapshot, or like capturing this like very specific moment. And I still have those moments. Those days are like less and less now. And lots of times, if I see something that will cause a response in me, it doesn't usually wipe out my whole day like it used to. But that's basically what would happen. Like I would, honestly, I'd be having conversations with other people, and this like thing would be playing out in the back of my mind about like what I should have said or what I should have done, or how everything was my fault, or like it was just like this crazy thought pattern, that I couldn't stop. And it felt like a bomb. It felt like an aggressive, unstoppable thing.
Yeah. Do you feel like making a song about stuff like that helps like heal the wounds and stuff? Because I've had many comedians on the show too, and they said a lot of like their best materials came from like times of pain, and then
Mm,
almost like putting that on the paper and then performing it live and turning it into something that everybody's like laughing at. It's like you kind of like dominate the problem. But I've never
right.
talked to like a singer about this subject. Do you get like a similar feeling when you turn something like that into a song?
Yeah, definitely. I find that, I mean, for me, there's kind of two layers of it, because it does feel um, incredibly cathartic to put it out there, and to have it written down. And like this idea of like, especially when I was very like dysfunctionally depressed, having something kind of created out of nothing was like really, really helpful for me. It was the same thing as like something simple like cleaning up a really messy room. Like it's like you start with something some way and then you finish and the thing is completely different. Like that, it was the same kind of like process. Um, but it also does get a little bit complicated, because not that I have difficulty talking about it, but it is a bit of a complex situation. So it's like, sometimes I find it better to not think about the idea of other people hearing it,
Mm.
not think about the idea of releasing it, and just kind of like, I have a ton of songs that people will never ever hear. And, there is definitely something in just writing them that feels like liberating or freeing, or lifting of a weight or whatever. But it does sometimes feel a little complicated when I think about the idea of like putting it out there, and giving it away, or like whatever the term is, like opening myself up. It's
Yeah, it's like a
very
vulnerable
vulnerable.
thing to do as well. But
Yeah, exactly. So that part of it, sometimes I have to just turn that part of my brain off. And also, I've when I was in repartee before, like with the songwriting thing was very much like a commodity. And now it's like I can't always think of it in that way, because it doesn't, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that's the age old thing. Like if you interview a lot of creative people or artistic types or whatever, or if you're creative yourself, like it's like the act of making art sometimes feels like the antithesis of selling it in some ways, right? Like
yeah.
obviously the world isn't completely binary, but like,
Hmm.
sometimes I just have to turn that like marketing side and business side of my brain off, and be like, hey, I'll just get this out, and if nobody ever hears it, that's totally cool.
Yeah, yeah. And it sometimes like that's the best stuff too when you try not to calculate it in a way.
Yes.
Like sometimes I fall into a lot too. It's just the way this stuff works. It's always just like a juggling act of, oh, I should do this more on my social media or whatever. But then
Yes.
sometimes just like taking a breath and just like making something that's just like raw and natural, like, and you put it out, and that's the shit that connects with people too. And
Hmm.
even I find too with like songs or other art form too, like a lot of like the creators, they'll like feel so vulnerable like putting something out too, and then those are like the ones that kind of get like the reaction because it is so real, and
Yeah.
people that you might not even know like just start connecting with it in a way and being like, oh my god, I needed to hear this today. And
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I think just bomb itself is such like a very unique concept too, and it's like a type of song like I don't really hear about often, like as you break it down too. So it's really cool that that you wrote it, and this is gonna
Thank
be
you.
part of like an EP coming out in November, am I correct?
Yes. Yeah. November 27th.
Awesome, awesome. Is there like a similar theme going through the EP, or is it like different songs? Or?
Not really. I called it the EP is called 1,000 Ways, and there is a song on the EP that is also called that. So it makes sense that I would call the EP that. But basically, it's like I liked that title because I felt like with um, being in my old band, like my life had a very singular focus. And I feel like going through that really difficult time, I realized, like, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about what is important to me and what matters to me in my life in general. And so, the song 1,000 Ways is all about like how, like the ultimate focus, if there is a singular focus in my life now, the ultimate focus is to just kind of be happy. And so, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that look like in terms of like, an integrated life with friends and family and hobbies and video games and music and everything kind of all together, right? Like it's like, you know, I think that especially when we're, I don't know if you can relate to this, but like when we're in our 20s and we're, if you're in any sort of like entrepreneurial world, you're taught that like, you have to hustle and grind and outwork all the competition and work harder than your peers and do all this stuff. And, that's kind of the only way to have any sort of success in this world. And if you don't do that, or if you don't have success, then it's your fault, or like it's a mark of you not working hard enough or being lazy or whatever. And I feel so different from that person now, and I just feel like, you know this EP is like very raw and vulnerable, and a lot of the songs I wrote, I wasn't thinking about how it was going to lead me to success, honestly. Like I know that sounds like maybe I'm being disingenuous, but like I honestly was just kind of writing to get it out. And um I just feel like, I think that there's just a bunch of different ways to get to this, like, I don't know, success, happiness, integrated, like whatever you want to call it. Like I think that there's more than one way, and there's like, I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. No, you make a lot of sense too. It's like sometimes people go through life thinking there's like a template to like how you
Yeah.
more based on like what other people are telling you and speaking in your ear. It's like I really related to you like when you were talking about how like in your 20s it's like people are like, "Oh, you got to hustle, you got to hustle, you got to hustle." And I've done that, and there's really like a lot of pros and cons to that. And like I've learned that actually when everything stopped over COVID, and I produced some of like my strongest work by taking a second to breathe. And I noticed like there is power into the hustle too, but
Hmm.
sometimes when you get too busy, you're just like not producing like I don't know, like your best work in a way. It's not
Right.
like I'm trying to think of like a good word for it, but it's just like not like it's not like true and just you're
Authentic.
kind of pushing it for the sake of working instead of
Yeah.
strategizing and breathing and
Yeah.
looking back on it and morphing it into and patching the different things. And yeah, that's been
Totally.
something that's been on my mind a lot too. And like
Yeah.
sometimes taking a breath is just as strong as the hustle, you know. You got
Definitely.
that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, I'm glad that you said that, because I do think that there is kind of this balance. I think that for a while coming out of the band, like for me, the pendulum had swung in the complete opposite direction. And I was like, fuck everything with business and, hustling and all this stuff. And I think that, I mean, there's a lot of people that live very full and happy lives, living their lives that way. So, who am I to, I'm not saying that that's all blanketly wrong. I
Mhm.
just mean that, like, in my situation, what that looked like for me was, um, you know, not addressing and not confronting my problems and throwing everything into my career. So that if my life was a table, it would have been one of those nightstands that's all from one leg, and then the leg was the band, and then getting rid of that leg, what do I have? There was nothing else to hold it up, right? So, like,
Yeah, true.
that's kind of how that mentality functioned for me in my life. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think that there's a lot of people that um, are like enjoy working that way, and like honestly enjoy it, and don't do it from an unhealthy standpoint of like not addressing their personal issues, which was kind of what I was doing. So it is, again, it's kind of complicated. But I think for me, I really had to distance myself from that way of operating within the industry, because it just was not like I couldn't. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not like I think I'm dedicated and I think I'm hardworking, but like I don't I feel like I'm just like a very, like, I don't know, like, even temperament. Like, I don't have like extreme highs and lows in my way of thinking. Or like, I don't, like, my partner, for example, will kind of go through these like obsessive phases where he'll just like latch on to like a very specific niche type of music and learn everything that he can, and it's really lovely and admirable. And I'm just not that person. I don't like go through these like obsessive like information hungry kind of phases, like. And I think that I felt like there was no other way to exist in the industry except to be obsessive about it.
Mhm.
And I kind of decided not to. I'm just not going to do that. I just can't do it. I did it and I ended up very, very sick. So, I'd rather like, be a part-time musician and a part-time bartender than to be a full-time musician and to be as unwell as I was. So, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. And sometimes just like I don't know, outside opinions can make you believe you have to do that hustle too, even
yeah.
though it feels wrong. I had a past guest on the show. She's like an author and like kind of like a life coach, and her name's Selena Rose. And one thing that she said that always sticks with me is listen to your body, because that
Mm,
has so much truth. Like sometimes your mind can be like, okay, I have to do this, and especially like in what we're talking about, the pressure to just exhaust yourself and hustle and hustle and hustle, but then you can start feeling sick and like
yeah,
you're not listening to like how you
exactly.
actually feel,
Yeah,
because like the mind game going on and everything. And yeah, it's
yeah,
even when I feel like I'm in an unhealthy rut, like sometimes like her voice just kind of pops in my head, and it just like it's like the best takeaway I've had from like all these interviews I've done. I've done like almost like 150 of them now,
wow.
and just like that little snippet, listen to your body. It's like always like sticks with me and like gives me like these reminders of, yo, you can breathe, you can
Yeah,
you can you can sleep in today. Like
Yeah.
just like reset, and then you'll be able to do what you wanted to do even stronger after that
Yep.
that little downtime or whatever.
That's really smart. Yeah. I remember actually I have to find the source of this because I have like brought up this anecdote to a couple of people, but I don't remember where it came from. I just remember I was listening to this podcast a couple years ago, and there was this guy on there who was like talking about how he was like this avid cross country or mountain biker, some sort of like competitive biker, and he, or cyclist I should say, and he was like trying to constantly beat his own record and his own like time trial or whatever. And so I'm just realizing that might only be a Mario Kart term. I don't know if
I know what you're talking about, but for other people.
he was always trying to beat his own ghost.
Yeah.
But anyway, he he was like, you know, working really, really hard and always trying to beat his own record. And then he kind of just one day decided to just kind of go out and enjoy the trail on his own and like enjoy riding. And when he came back and checked his time, it was either like the exact same time or actually even slightly. Sorry, getting a
No
call
problem.
from Sierra Leone apparently. And yeah, he like found that his time was either exactly what it was when he was trying very hard, or it might have even been like a second or two faster.
Wow.
So yeah, it was kind of like, I wish I could find the source of that podcast, but that honestly, like I think back on that pretty regularly because I feel like that's kind of, doesn't that happen all the time? Like we work so hard and we think about these things and like, you know, like a really intense stakes, and then it's not like we don't just kind of sit back and enjoy the work. And it's like, you know, there's all kinds of studies that show that once you start working past like 35 hours a week or something, like there's not much difference between the output between someone who works like a 35-hour week and a 60-hour week. Like it's basically the same thing, because at a certain point you reach a point where you're just not being as productive as you would be if you did have rest and time in between work. And you know, I always found that really interesting.
Yeah, it's so true too. And I noticed too, like with like a lot of like different artists, it's like you start doing whatever your art form is, from music, filmmaking, painting. It starts because you just genuinely love it, like you enjoy doing it, and then once it starts turning into a thing, it's I don't know, you can, like the biker you mentioned, you're doing it because of pressure and
Yeah.
everything, and you can get into these moments where you just hate what you love.
Yeah.
And that's something that happened to me like a couple of years ago. Outside of this, I'm a videographer, and early or like probably about like 8 years ago, I fell into like this one YouTube channel of filming like battle rap, which I was originally a fan of, and then I got so deep in that scene and the way it was growing, and I remember going to events and being like just like disgruntled and like stressed. Like I
Yeah.
hate this. And then I had a moment like the biker where it's just like I took a deep breath, and I took a couple events off, and I went back into it, and it's like, you know what, I actually fucking love this shit, but just
Yeah.
my own pressure of like trying to be better than whatever your last thing was or whatever, it takes like almost like it starts turning into your craft turns into like the full-time job feeling.
Yeah.
And whatever.
Exactly. It's like you're motivated by like obligation or you know, like something like a competition, even if it's within yourself. And then it's like, well, what did I like about this? You know, what was the thing that drew me to this in the first place? And kind of going back to that space is hard to do, but it can be a nice reminder sometimes.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I forget who said it too. Somebody said to me too, it's like you're a professional when you have moments where you just really hate what you love.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's a crazy game. It's fun to kind of break it down with you too, because it's such an untraditional path in like I don't know. I find like many creatives to I don't know. I guess it's easier now because there are podcasts and like you can easily access like your favorite people on Twitter or whatever. But back in the day, to like pursue this, like at times like you feel like kind of like an alien. And I know
Mm-hmm.
you're from like a smaller town, and same with me as well too. And I had like all these feelings to pursue like the arts, but
Mm.
it wasn't something I did till like later on in my life because it just felt like, no, you have to do something practical.
Yeah.
Like when really, like I learned later on that this is practical. People get a lot out of this, and
Mm-hmm.
you do serve like a purpose in a way. But like earlier, it's just like I don't know, almost discouraged, and like
Totally.
I was kind of like half doing like little projects like in the closet, and then
Yep.
I don't know. It's just, like luckily I had an epiphany, and I think like lots of like small town people who have that seed in them for whatever that sparked them, like go through those waves as well.
Absolutely. I totally relate to that. Where did you grow up?
Niagara. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, yeah. Actually, like lots of people, like when I say that, they think like I live like in the touristy area. And so they're like,
Right.
that's weird. But there's actually like a really big suburban area outside of it. And
Oh, okay.
it's kind of got that small town feeling. Everybody knows each other. And yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
it's interesting to be in the city right now. And like, yeah, you mentioned you were here like for 5 years, right?
Yeah. Well, it'll be 6 years now in January.
Yeah. How did you feel like initially, like living in the city, like making that jump? Like it is a weird spot because even like you drive like a half hour out of Toronto and it feels like a different universe, you know? There's like
Yeah.
a different pace and just, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely a lot of new things to get used to. And there's still, honestly, there's still some things about living, I think just kind of on the mainland in general. Like the weather is just a completely different world here. I mean, Newfoundland, I think, is kind of known for its bad weather, but St. John's especially is like, I think it's like, I actually don't know. I don't want to haul a number out of my ass, but there's like so much fog and overcast and rain like throughout the year. The summers can be, quite cold. Like it's not as cold there in the winter as a lot of people think it is. It's actually like way colder here. So that was another thing to get used to. But like this this mentality, like I think that almost every Newfoundlander I know has this, where like if it's a nice day, you feel guilty for not being outside because
Mhm.
there's so few of them, especially in the summer. Honest to God, like the nice, hot, warm, sunny days in St. John's are very few and far between, and especially like this idea of like a warm night just doesn't, like the temperature drops a good 10 degrees every night. So like that was like a really like, I still feel um like it's like a gift in the summers to have a warm night. Like it's like such a really beautiful thing.
Yeah,
And
that's a great
like,
thing to appreciate too. Yeah.
yeah, it's like honestly, and I'm like one of those people that's cold all the fucking time. So like, you know, being able to actually sit outside on my front porch and like maybe sweat a little bit is like so amazing. And this idea too of like, you're gonna find this hilarious, but like being able to drive to the American border is like honestly something that you can't do in Newfoundland. Like there's nowhere you can't, if you drive for 9 hours in the opposite direction of St. John's, you're still going to be on Newfoundland, right? So it's
Yeah,
like,
true.
you know, that I don't know, it's just like those two things seem so small and subtle, but like it's a pretty dramatic shift in like with driving to the border. It's like this idea of accessibility, being able to drive, not last summer, but the summer before, I drove down to Nashville and I did it in a day. Like that's just like inconceivable when you're living on an island. So
Yeah, yeah.
stuff like that is really neat.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's good that you say things like that just to put it like perception, because sometimes people get used to
Of
the
course.
blessings and the gifts you have, and where it's like I don't know. I think the human brain in general too. It's like you get used to something great,
Yeah.
and then you stop thinking about it, and it's almost like it turns into like a greed of like but this isn't perfect, and I need
Yep.
this and this. When
Yep.
really like sometimes you just can take a breath and just look around you, even at some low times. It's like, you know what? I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but that isn't that human nature though, like we just kind of get used to these like incredible blessings and that's it.
Yeah, yeah, that's facts. But
Mhm.
I want to thank you for going deep with me today. I
Yeah.
love this. We're gonna have to do a part 2 down the road,
Yeah.
because I'm a new fan. I'm excited for the new EP to come out,
Thank
and
you.
that is my notes, November 27th.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely release this episode sometime before then, maybe in the next couple weeks or so. But once again, thank you for your time today, Meg. And
Thank you,
yeah,
Sean.
I'm excited to see what's around the corner for you. And like always, we're going to end with a song. So here is Bomb. Go. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Everyone who listens to the Creative Imbalance podcast can burn in hell.